fact, the season of smoke pollution and fog has made a comeback. The average air quality index has seen a speedy deterioration in the past few days. It has already entered the red zone, with many residents complaining of sore throat and itchy eyes. In fact, the average AQI is currently inching close to 300, which will make the air very poor to breathe. And it's not just the air, but also toxicity has also spilled to water. A thick foam could be seen floating on the surface of Yamuna River since this morning. Delhi government is holding back-to-back meetings, with one lined up today, as it plans to run a special campaign at 13 hospitals in the national capital. Kritika Tiwari, my colleague who has, of course, been reporting on this development with us, joins me live. Kritika, there are multiple facts of what we're essentially looking at in the national capital. But first things first, we'll talk about the AQI. Given the fact that what's unfortunate, like we've been seeing through your reportage, and of course, we've had that multiple conversations about how what we're essentially looking at is extremely concerning, considering the fact that the AQI also gives rise to multiple health conditions.
That's absolutely right, and we've also learning through doctors from the RML as well as AIMS that it is not just people who have predisposed conditions, respiratory problems, but even people with no history of respiratory problems so far are also adversely affected by the toxic air that gets trapped in the National Capital Region during this time. The AQI currently stands at 293, and it's just a matter of hours, I would believe, wherein it would cross the very poor mark, and that would also trigger the Central Air Control Panel to also release the stage 2 of GRAP. Now, remember, all these measures are already in place, coupled with a lot of policies at the national level, but we are yet to see a comprehensive response, because a lot of these policies are still only targeting the effects. A lot penalization is something that is not happening. And as far as Delhi is concerned, industrial pollution, vehicular pollution, as well as burning of waste and stubble from the larger NCR regions are the major causes that are deteriorating the air quality. Remember, Diwali is still round the corner. It is still before that season. And just before that, we're experiencing an extremely deteriorating air quality in the capital. What we're learning as of now is that almost all stations in Delhi NCR are recording poor air quality in the poor category. It's everywhere right now above 200, which is something that we had not seen in this season before. There were always regions somewhere in South Delhi that were in the moderately polluted range. But right now we are learning that all of these stations are recording an AQI of over 200. And definitely the 13 hotspots that have been identified by the Delhi government are consistently recording an air quality over 300. So the air quality is already dipped to very poor in multiple regions in Delhi, and the situation looks pretty grim. But what policies and what more can be done is still something that we are tracking. Political blame game, of course, is one thing that goes on unabated, whether it is blaming Haryana over Punjab or Punjab over Haryana, or talking about whether or not pollution levels have decreased. This is something that we're only seeing out play in the political arena. The strong data that backs any of these claims is still lacking, and more so measures that could prevent us from reaching this situation wherein we are breathing a cocktail of chemicals in these months, and that can be avoided, is something that we are still looking forward to. Over to you.
Which is a very, interesting aspect that you point out, considering the timing. You're, of course, pointing out that Diwali is just around the corner, and that's a, matter of fact, what we're going to be looking at these numbers. But Kritika, here's something interesting while you draw perspective. In 2022, you're looking at an AQI of 312. In 2021, you're looking at 382. In 2020, you're looking at 414. And in 2019, you're looking at 337, which is concerning. And the bigger question in that aspect of when you were drawing perspective is, when we know these numbers are going to be crossing and there are policies in effect, then what really happens? Why aren't we able to, find a solution, a midpoint rather, in terms of the fact that these AQI numbers, when we know there are multiple factors, which I'm sure you'll draw perspective on once again for our viewers to better understand that, we don't look at it come any number below 300. In fact, if anything at all, it's increasing and touching almost 350 here, which is alarming.
Right, in fact, essentially, Delhi geographically also is placed in such a scenario wherein air gets trapped. This is what experts call an air shed area. So, air from whenever there is a northern westerly winds, which is coming in from Himachal, from Punjab, it does carry pollutants from that area as well. Now, which is same for Delhi and carrying its polluted air to the other regions of the national capital. Now, again, air is not something that sees boundaries, right? So, the other thing that we're also learning is in this weather specifically, the wind speed is quite low. And whenever that happens, the pollutants do not get dispersed. They stay suspended. Add that to the industrial activities that happens in a bustling city like Delhi, wherein you will have vehicular pollution, wherein there will be industries that will have their own emissions, as well as construction activities. Now that produces a lot of heat, dust, and chemicals. As that rises, so does cold air from around the Himalayas. And again, we are in a trap situation. So geographically, yes, Delhi is at a vulnerable point wherein this is something that does happen, which is why a lot of experts repeatedly call out that it is not something that the governments can wake up to a few weeks before October, when the effects of the poor air quality actually starts to show on the AQI scale. But it has to be a year-long effect. How can we ensure that our construction adheres to minimum dust mitigation or dust release policy? How is it that we can control our vehicular emissions in check? POC is one, but then how is the enforcement taking place? If the enforcement is not happening, are there any penal actions? So it is a whole range of policies that have to be checked, not just from, say, September end, but from, it has to be a year-round effect, and that we are still not seeing being applied on the ground. Sometimes it's because of political reasons, sometimes it's because of lack of funds, and many a times it's a whole host of reasons that still are not being studied enough or prioritized enough sadly in the NCR region, which again puts the lives of many residents, vulnerable and those without any predisposed respiratory conditions, at a huge risk in this season.
Right, Kritika. I appreciate you putting that into context for us as far as, what the ground situation is like. And like you rightly pointed out, unfortunately, we'll only be looking at those numbers rise. One can only hope with the back-to-back meetings that has been called for, there will be a better implementation of the policies that already exist, or if not, a better action. But stay with me, Kritika. I'm going